Hello and welcome to Sasha Says. I'm Sasha Gardner and I'm so excited to have you here with me as I embark on this new chapter. In this podcast, I'm speaking to incredible people who will be sharing their stories and expertise, and I hope that will help inspire you and help you on your journey. Please also don't forget to press the follow button, like, comment, and share with your friends. It's a small thing for you, but a huge thing for us, and it really does help. Paul Wilden, welcome to the podcast. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to start off just to tell us a bit about yourself, what it was like to grow up with Microtia, and how your parents approached it in the early days.
Sure. And thank you very much for having me, Sasha. It's a pleasure to be here. So I guess for me, I've been on a real kind of journey with my ear and Microtia really throughout my life. When I was a child, I was really kind of unaware that there was anything kind of different about me versus my sister. My parents both treated me exactly the same way as they treated my sister. It was only when I needed to start going in and having surgery that they needed to sit me down and explain that my ear was different, and I would be going into hospital because of my ear. I know from discussing this with my parents in the last couple of decades that they found that much more stressful and daunting than I did. As soon as they finished telling me, I went back off to play with my Lego and my Action Man, and it was just like, right, okay. And I think initially the thought of going into hospital I viewed with excitement, because I would be taken to the toy shop first to go and choose some presents because I was going into hospital, and my sister didn't get anything, so it was kind of one-upmanship. I was getting presents, she wasn't. There was that kind of mindset in play. The experience in hospital was both good and bad, and I know today it's less about the surgery in terms of the reconstructive surgery that I had, and more about the BAHA, the bone anchored hearing aid, and creating less invasive ways to allow an individual with Microtia to really reach their true potential. So for me, it was a different sort of dynamic, a different reality, but we're talking about the 1970s here.
And things in the 1970s are very different to things now. How
Yes.
old were you when you had your reconstructive surgery?
I would have been somewhere between 4 and 6. It was all done at University College Hospital in London. I was up there for periods of time. Back then, parents weren't allowed to stay overnight in the hospital with their child, so I was left there. I know my mum, one of the stories she recalls is she was about to go, and she went off to use the bathroom, and when she came back into the ward where my bed was, she found me crying into the collar of her coat. She had one of those coats where they had those kind of fox fur collars that were all the rage back then. And the nurse had just said to her, pick up your coat, go, don't look back. So that was the instruction that she was given, in terms of just go, we'll then deal with that afterwards. So I don't remember that, but she remembers that, and that story has sort of stuck with me in terms of when we kind of replay the experiences. I mean, some of the more positive things related to being a kid in hospital was there was a song on the radio at the time called "Whoa, I'm Going to Barbados."
I'm going to Barbados?
Yes.
Oh, that one. Whoa, I'm going to No, I don't know. Oh, is that the one? Okay.
The airline was called Coconut Airways, or Coconut Airlines. And myself and one of the other kids in the ward, we made paper aeroplanes, and we wrote on the side of it Coconut Airways. And we were throwing them around. And my sister can remember finding the paper aeroplanes on the street outside the hospital, because we were yes, that was one of the more positive things. We also used to go and take empty syringes from the medical room, which is very, very naughty, but that's what you do.
Really naughty.
fill them up with water and have water fights, just spraying the syringes around the wards and getting told off. And those kind of memories, they make me smile. And helping the lady that was doing the hot chocolates of evening drinks round with the trolley, I would go round with her, holding the trolley, asking people what they wanted for their evening drink. So they're kind of some of the more positive memories. To this day, I still have a phobia of needles because injections I had to have as a result of the surgery. But, I was a little bit precocious in that if my mum was around when I needed to have an injection, and the only way I would agree to have the injection was if she gave me a present. Now, the present could be a pencil or a rubber or something like that. It didn't need to be like a major thing, but, I kind of learned that, in order to for me to conceive that they could give me an injection, there needed to be some upside from it.
There's obviously some negatives there, but equally some positives.
Yes.
And I also think it's really hard for a parent. When you said that story, it made me feel really sad because your mother wouldn't have wanted to have left you, and to have just been told to leave and don't look back, that's really incredibly difficult for a mother.
Yes.
What made your parents decide for you to have the surgery? Did they weigh up their options? Did they consider maybe allowing you to wait until you were older?
Yes, there's different ways of answering that. I mean, they clearly they listened to what the recommendations were from the surgeons and the specialists around what to do. Back then, the surgery that I had, where they moved cartilage from my rib cage, they only did it on boys, and the reason for that is they used the logic: well, girls can have long hair, it doesn't matter, they don't need it. So, which sounds horrific in the 21st century to kind of use that line, but that was the reality back then. That because boys were more likely to have their ears on show. So that was part of the backstory. My mum, and back in the 70s, it was the view was doctors, priests, MPs, they were all on pedestals. So an example of that, what I mean by that is that the surgeon came round to my bed with some students and we're talking about what was going on with me and looking at my notes, etc. And my mum happened to make a comment, to which the surgeon very flippantly said, "Oh, well, the mother thinks, and what does the mother know?" Yes, so that was the environment and the reality back then. So there was a lot of kind of pressure, I think, probably put on them. There was a time when my parents were offered a brand new procedure. It was still very much in its infancy, where they would drill through my skull to make me an ear canal that potentially would then give me some hearing. But because of my age, that hole would then close up over time. And my parents took the decision, and I think it was the right decision, not to go ahead with the surgery, even though they were under a lot of pressure to do so, because they felt that would then be showing me what I was missing and then taking it away again.
So you're talking about the surgery where they make the hole?
Yes. And now, ultimately, I had that done. I chose to have that done myself in 1994 when I was an adult, so I made that decision myself. But at the time they were offered it, it was I would say completely untested, but my parents felt that I was being used as a guinea pig to try something out. And they felt that if it worked, then yes, it would give me hearing on my right side for a period of time. But then that hole would close up again because I was still growing and I'd be back to square one. And therefore it's like, okay, well, we'll give you the hearing you haven't got today, show you what it's like, and then we're going to take it away from you again.
I've read that too. When people, especially younger children, have their ear canal reconstructed, that because of the age, it does close up. And that's one of the things that happens.
Yes. I probably had 8 or 9 surgeries. I was in and out of University College Hospital a lot. So it wasn't a one-time visit. I was a regular, so to speak. But so there was a lot that happened before I was 8.
And why 9 surgeries?
I don't know why there were so many. And to be fair, I've actually never asked that question. I mean, some of the questions I've asked my mum and dad. I mean, my dad's no longer around, so I'm glad I asked the questions when I did. But for me, these were, I call them AOCs, acts of courage. And it was an act of courage because I went to my mum and dad and said, how did you feel when your firstborn didn't have two fully formed ears? What was your immediate reaction? And tell me about your experiences taking me in for the surgery. And just, I wanted to be able to have that open, honest conversation with them whilst I could. And for anyone listening to this podcast, thinking about an act of courage, if it's something along the lines of what I'm talking about here, go for it, do it. Life is too short for regrets. Ask while you can ask. Because if you're going to be looking to ask a parent or a grandparent, they don't go on forever. So ask them while you can, whilst they're still around, while they're still remembering.
That's really good advice. So you have right-sided microtia,
Yes.
and are you fully hearing in your left side?
Yes, I am. Yeah, and they did when I one of the procedures I had done, and this may be one of the 8 or 9, was to pin this ear back. And the reason why that was done was because this one stuck out a little bit more, was to make it less obvious. So they kind of pinned the ear back. So I don't know whether they even still do that today. But again, that's all about the look. And for me now, if I was to have any other surgery done on my ear today, it would purely be about hearing. I would not do it for looks. It's too painful, both mentally and physically. I just wouldn't want to do that. For me, the only thing that would get me back into an operating theatre for a procedure on my ear would be to give me, I want to say full hearing, but sufficiently good hearing on my right side. Beyond that, I wouldn't do it.
Do you wear a hearing aid?
No.
So you have no hearing aids whatsoever?
No.
And you have right-sided microtia?
Yeah.
And do you have full hearing in your left side?
Yes.
How is that for you?
Well, again, it was my normal. So, because I'd never had two ears that looked the same, because I'd never had full hearing on my right side. And off the back of the procedure I had in 1994, they reshaped the ear to make it look more like an ear. And it was only after I had that done that my mum actually said to me, "Oh, I'm so much happier with the way your ear looks now. We never were really happy with the way it looked after that first procedure, but clearly we were never going to say that to you. That was just something we kept private to ourselves." So after that 1994 procedure, it looked more like an ear. Equally, I then had some hearing on that side. And one of the most emotional conversations, even today it still gives me goosebumps, was when I left the specialist's clinic after he'd taken everything off, he'd done a hearing test, and I called my mum and I said, "I can hear." And even today, that was quite emotional. Yeah. But that then for me demonstrated that going through that procedure was worthwhile because it made my right ear look more like an ear, which sounds very superficial, but it gave me a level of confidence. But equally, then being able to hear on my right side. What I then found very odd is that I couldn't then play sound. So I would
play sound.
Yeah. So for example, when I only had hearing on my left side, because that was my experience in life to date, when someone called my name or when something happened, something got dropped, I knew where that sound had come from. I could look straight at that place and connect the sound with the visual. And I then had 30% hearing on this side. So the sound had moved by 30%. So I really struggled for a period of time to locate where the sound had come from and adjust to a different way of hearing. So I almost had to retrain my brain. And it was strange things. I worked in an open plan office, so someone calling my name because they got a question for me related to the file I was working on. And I'm like, well, who said that? Where did that noise come from?
You discombobulated.
Yes, absolutely. And you're being in the back of my dad's car in summer, because I had the procedure done in April. So let's say by June, in the back of the car, window down, and a motorbike goes past the car. For me, it sounded like the motorbike was coming through the car because it was so loud. But that was a positive for me, because it was like, oh wow, I've never had that sensation before.
I want to
Being
dig into that.
my ears popping on both sides, I'd never had that before as well. So it's just interesting that right side was man-made, but it still would clear after the surgery because of decompression.
But how did they get you 30% hearing?
So if I go, let me take a step back. Backpacking around the world in 1991, 1992, which for me was my kind of rite of passage. And one of the things I wanted to process and deal with on my trip around the world was my ear. So before I left the UK in August 91, my hair was kind of below my ear. Admittedly, over the years, it had gone from here to here to here. So it was slowly getting higher or shorter. But I wanted to kind of get to grips with that part of my identity, if you like. And one of those steps related to getting to grips with my ear was having my hair cut short above my ear whilst I was living in Sydney. And I've written about this on the Microtia UK website and the experience of that. But then also talking to people after that who would then ask me, so what happened to your ear? And I didn't really have a huge amount of fact about it. I didn't know what it was called. So coming back to the UK, going to the family GP, starting to ask some questions, they connected me to an ENT specialist. I then went and met him, had a full head scan done, I think MRI, I think it was, and went back in to see him. And he said to me, right, well, your middle and inner ear are formed. It is worthwhile us performing a procedure to drill through your skull and look to give you some hearing on your right side. To which I was like, whoa, okay. Didn't see that coming. But decided that, yeah, I was going to go for it. And there were no guarantees in terms of whether I'd have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% hearing. It was a matter of it's worth giving it a go because the middle and inner ear are fully formed. Now, the little hairs on the middle ear that's supposed to move with the noise vibration, mine are rigid, they don't move. So I was never going to have full hearing on that side. There was, for me, the benefits outweighed the risks, and I decided on balance I was going to go for it. And it's only after I'd had the procedure done and gone back, had the hearing test done, that I then found out that I'd got 30% on my right side. I'm now back to being profoundly deaf because, as I was saying earlier, as a child, the hole closes up. Guess what? As an adult, it does as well.
I didn't know that. That's really interesting. So your mother was right because she always said to you when you were younger, if you go ahead.
Now here's this recording. She's going to repeat this to me. See, I'm always right.
Your mother is always right.
Yes, she's going to love that.
So let's go back to the hair conversation. You mentioned that you had your hair in that fun style. What do they call that style? Curtains? When it's like that?
Yeah, like that. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was sort of basin, was it? Cut straight down, round. But in the 70s, and I guess to some extent the early 80s, less so the early 80s, it kind of was on point in fashion. So I didn't look kind of like odd compared to everybody else. So it kind of, well, I wouldn't go that far, but I didn't look the opposite of trendy.
So you had your hair that was covering your ear, and then gradually started cutting it. And then at what point did you say, it sounds to people who don't have microtia, they would just probably not think it's a big deal. But I know it's a big deal. It's the same as me putting my hair up and embracing what I have. I would like you to talk about more of that in the sense of what was the decision around that? You must have had to have flipped the switch somehow and reframed how you were thinking about it. and then said, okay, this is me?
Yeah, look, it was another AOC. It was another AOC. It was an act of courage for me, but it was also a challenge to myself in that I wanted to see if I could step up and embrace that kind of change. And look, that was March 1992, so a long time ago. But I remember it as though it was yesterday. It was a big deal for me at the time. And I was living in North Sydney. I'd found this hair salon, so I took the train there, and I can remember exactly where the salon was. It was on the corner of a street, a big kind of pedestrian crossing right beside it. Ground floor, 3 steps up to go in, glass fronted. I can remember the lady who was cutting my hair she wasn't really that bothered, almost indifferent. I didn't tell her that it was the first time I was doing it because I didn't want to make it into a bigger deal than it already was.
Yeah.
She just cut my hair as though she was cutting anyone's hair. And the usual kind of inane questions you get in the hairdressers: what have you planned for the weekend? What have you been up to? All that kind of stuff. But in my head, as she's asking me all these questions, I'm saying to myself, or shouting to myself, why is she not appreciating how big a deal this is for me?
Yeah,
this
it's a big deal.
Really, really super brave. And looking, when I was on the train going to the hair salon, I even had an argument with myself in my head in terms of, you don't need to do this, leave as is, it's fine, versus, come on, you can do this. Why? What's holding you back? You're 20, whatever. You should be able to kind of deal with this. So it was that kind of argument all the way to the hair salon, and it was almost kind of flip a coin when I went in terms of what I was going to say to the hairdresser to do. And then when I then left the salon, and I can remember being stood at the pedestrian crossing waiting for the traffic lights to change to green, and I'm looking at everybody on the other side of the street and beside me to see if anyone is kind of looking at me, staring, pointing, and nobody was looking. Cool. So for me, it's like, wow, no one's noticed. This is a bigger deal for me than it is for anyone else, and that's often the case. But when I then got home, and typical kind of student backpacker accommodation, 3-bedroom apartment, 9 of us living in the apartment because we needed to work out how we're going to pay the rent, kind of thing. And the girls that I shared with, I think it was probably a ratio of 5 boys to 4 girls. The girls, they all came up, gave me a hug. They knew it was a big deal for me. But that was really one of the first acts of courage for me in relation to my ear. So that was 1992. The surgery on my ear was 1994, because off the back of then having my ear on show, some people did then start asking me questions about my ear, what had happened, what it was called, was there anything that could be done in terms of hearing, which I then found almost a little bit kind of disappointing in myself that I'd never asked the question. So I then wanted to kind of research, understand it, find out what the options were, which is what then led to the surgery.
When you were speaking, questions were coming up in my mind over and over again, and that is that you had reconstructive surgery when you were 6. So they'd already made the shape of the ear, but you didn't know any different. But later down the line, your mother said that she wasn't particularly happy with the result.
Yeah.
And you spent most of your life still hiding it. So that's quite important, Paul, because it's not just a question of getting a surgery and having 2 ears. You did have a surgery. I know, and I appreciate that it was in the 70s and things have changed a lot since then. But you still, whether you'd had the surgery or not, you still were impacted by the way it made you feel, in the sense of you were hiding it. You went to the hairdressers. You built this story up in your head, and rightly so, because it's part of your life, and people asking you these questions all the time will make you feel a certain way. You cut your hair, you celebrate yourself, but you still really weren't happy with your ear in the first place.
No, but I think also what you've got to keep in mind, and I think this is important, particularly in in 2025, people kind of listening, is that back in the 70s, 80s, early 90s, even in 1992, when I had my hair cut short, I never met anyone else with the same ear as me. Never. So it's very different today because you've got support groups, you've got charities, you've got the internet, so you can search things and connect and find out more. I didn't have any of that when I was a kid.
Same.
Right. So, I think that kind of, that played into it a lot as well, because there wasn't anyone that I could really kind of lean on to say, well, this has happened to me, what about you? So there wasn't anyone I could relate to, because they were either on the same journey, ahead of me, same time as me, or behind me. So the first time I met somebody with the same condition was, I was working for a big US investment bank. I'd been sent to New York on business. I was in the hotel gym one morning, time difference, I was up early, so I got time to go to the gym. And the chap that was the instructor working in the gym, he'd got the same ear as me. And I can remember really being like deer in the headlights, because I'm like, wow, oh gosh, someone else. And I can remember sitting at one of the pieces of equipment in the gym. These were the machines which you pull down.
Yeah.
It was one of them. I didn't even know where I was sat. And I'm looking at this guy thinking, right, well, how do I start a conversation? Because it just seems a bit odd to go and go, oh, I've got the same ear as you. But I did manage to get into a conversation with him. And he talked about the fact that when he was a kid, he had a Velcro ear that he just stuck on. When he was playing sports, it would come off, and his mates, when he was playing, whether it was American football or whatever, they would say, "Oh, John, you've dropped your ear," and then pass it to him, he'd stick it back on and carry on. So it was just that was an important event as well, because I met someone else with the same condition, but there was some humour about it as well.
Yeah, I remember my sister, she works with children, and she met one of the parents' children, and he had Microtia. And so she said to his mum, so your son has Microtia, and apparently the lady just screamed, how do you know what that is? And was really happy, and now they're best friends.
Right. Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because you have that feeling of you're excited because you've never met anyone else who has Microtia, and so that excitement, you want to just go straight up to them, but then you have that resistance because you kind of feel like is that a little bit weird?
Hello. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. But I think equally, I was very kind of respectful of I think I was in my approach, thinking, right, well, I want to talk to them, but what if they don't want to talk to me?
Exactly.
So, because it's also about that person's readiness to share those experiences. And we're all on our own personal journey in so many different ways, not just about your ear. And you may or may not be ready to talk about it. So there's that dynamic that's in play as well, that you want to be thoughtful and respectful of where the other person might be on their own journey.
When you grew up, how was your confidence?
I was thinking about this earlier. I think it was okay. Where I think I was impacted by my ear is because I didn't really hear a lot what was going on the right. I was somewhat of a loner. So I had friends, but it was a small, close-knit friendship group. And I guess because there's only ever been one of me with Microtia, there wasn't another version of me with two ears so I can compare and contrast. I kind of wonder whether the fact that I couldn't hear on one side, and therefore I missed a lot of the conversations, and therefore couldn't necessarily engage in all of that banter in the playground or classroom, whether that had an impact on my friendship group. I mean, I know my parents were told that I would never be academically successful because I would miss too much in the classroom. So,
what are your thoughts on that now?
A horrific statement to make, but I'm the kind of person that's more glass half full than glass half empty. So when someone tells me you're not going to be able to do that, I'm like, yes, I am. I'll prove you wrong. So I very much step up to those kind of messages. But not everyone does. So, impact of what you say is really got to be thought through. But I kind of also wonder if that message hadn't been delivered to my parents and I hadn't heard the message, whether I would be where I am today, because it is a bit red rag to a bull and I'll prove you wrong and yes, I can do it. It was almost the fuel to the fire that I needed to push myself.
Do you think that's shaped you and formed your career? Having Microtia, do you think that's been a part of your success?
Yes, is the short answer to that. I think initially in my earlier career, it was probably more in my subconscious than my conscious. So, I've always been very focused and very driven and had that desire to succeed. I think some of that comes from my admiration for my grandfather, my mum's dad, who, when I was born, offered to give me his right ear so I could have two. Now, that clearly couldn't happen for lots of different reasons.
Yeah, of course.
But I guess for him, he could see what potential was coming in terms of being bullied at school, and I was, and wanted to try and kind of protect me as much as he could. But my mum's father was incredibly successful professionally, is a role model to me, and his professional success has been a real kind of incentive for me as well to try and be successful. So it will have had an impact. It will have molded who I am. It doesn't define me, but I would say in my early career, it was more subconscious. I think as I've become more senior and more successful, I've seen the opportunity to kind of use my ear as a means of educating, raising awareness, and getting involved in a couple of charities that are very much focused on facial difference.
Can we dig into that a bit more, please? Because that is literally my next question. We have Changing Faces, and you're currently now board member of Face Equality International. How did you and what made you decide to get into that?
And there's also another one, the Smile Asia as well. So as you'll be aware, I lived down in Asia for 14 years as part of my kind of career. So I moved out there in 2005, came back in 2019. When I worked for another American investment bank at the time. When that bank asked me to move back to the UK in 2009, I decided that I wasn't ready to come back to the UK. I was enjoying life too much in Asia and wanted to continue living and working in that part of the world. So I decided to leave that bank. Before I joined the next bank, I went on a bit of a voyage of discovery in terms of me. And that included sort of various acts of courage. So that's where I learned the term AOC. And one of the things I then looked to do was to see if I could find a way to get involved in charities that supported people with facial difference as a means of my own reconciliation, I use that word, with my ear, and how I could find a way to leverage it in a more positive way. So some of those experiences I've talked about when I was in the hospital, the needles, being bullied at school, and that experience was I had long hair, but on the school bus, being got in a neck lock, hair pulled up, and everybody else on the bus coming and touching and poking my ear and being unable to move. Yes, so those kind of negative experiences, and I needed to find a way to channel the experiences in a more kind of positive way.
Yeah.
So I got connected to James Partridge, who was the founder of Changing Faces. James was in a car crash in his first year of uni, where the Land Rover rolled, the petrol tank blew up, and he ended up with significant burns to his face and other parts of his body, and that resulted in him having acquired facial difference through accident. And his experiences of dealing with the general public, as he then had to adjust to how he looked, was really interesting for me to kind of hear and understand. So I connected with him. I then did some research internally in Singapore. I had a friend who was a dentist, and if you think about craniofacial, microtia, cleft lip, cleft palate, and any various other conditions, they often play into the need for dental reconstruction as well. So this friend of mine that was a dentist connected me to the specialist that ran the Women and Children's ward at a Singapore hospital, Vincent Yeo. And I went and met with Vincent. At the same time, I was talking to James within Changing Faces about setting up a Singapore branch of Changing Faces. When I spoke to Vincent, he's like, well, don't do that. Why don't you come and join the board of what was then called Operation Smile Singapore? So I went and joined the board of Operation Smile, then got rebranded as Smile Asia, and I got more involved with Smile Asia and a member of the board of directors of Smile Asia. So that's been going on now for 13, 14 years. And the focus of Smile Asia is about running medical missions across third world Asia, where they either provide medicine and medical equipment, medical equipment and surgeons to perform the surgeries to correct cleft lip, cleft palate and other facial difference. So that's something I'm still very much involved in. I then became an ambassador to Changing Faces. At that point in time, James was thinking about the idea of internationalizing Changing Faces and wanted to see whether I could sort of play a part in taking Changing Faces offshore to the UK. Struggled with that because of the economic environment, and a lot of charities were really sort of focused on their home market and making sure that they were generating enough income to survive. And then James then decided to set up a new charity called Face Equality International, and I then got involved in that. I've been on the board of FEI now for a number of years. And for me, with both Smile Asia and FEI, they are personally so important to me because of my own lived experience. And I'm not on the board just because I'm a senior MD of an investment bank that's lived around the world, and that's the next thing you do when you look to kind of step away from full-time work. I'm in it because it's meaningful for me. It's very relatable, and I really feel as though I can kind of add value through my kind of lived experience.
What value do you think that you add? Why do you think it's important?
Awareness, because I think that people need to understand the experiences that individuals have had. And I kind of feel that because I've had professional success, I've lived internationally, I've run regional businesses both in Europe and Asia Pacific, and off the back of that, global businesses. And part of my own personal strategy around why I moved to Asia was that I wanted to position myself to run a global business, and how could I ever be considered for that if I'd only ever worked in one region? So I've been very strategic in terms of how I was thinking about my career. And I then got to a point where I was a member of various senior committees. I was mentoring people. I felt that I'd created a platform. Now, the question is whether it was accidental or deliberate, that because I'd had that professional success, I got the ability to talk about my experiences in a way that I was probably going to get more people to listen. So I felt that I had both an opportunity and to some extent an obligation, because I wanted to try to ensure that anyone else being born with microtia or any other kind of condition never felt alone, that they realised that there were other people out there that had been on the journey they were going on. It wasn't something that was going to limit them. They could still have success in whatever way they wanted to define success, whether that be working title, where you live, what you do, any and all of the above. And I felt that it was important to talk and share my experiences So I've done that internally within companies I've worked for. I've done that through the charities. I've done that through podcasts. I've done that through telling my life story on the Microtia UK website. All of that just is really all about trying to kind of raise awareness of people with difference, whether that's kind of neurodiversity or physical diversity. So for me, that was something I wanted to do. I guess the other point to add is that I did it for selfless and selfish reasons. Selfless because I want to raise awareness. I want other people to know about my experiences in the hope that that might help someone else in some small way. But selfish because it continues to be an act of courage and challenge for me to step up and talk about my ear. And even today at a level, there's some discomfort around it. May not get a sense of that, but there is.
I understand that completely. Do you think that ever goes away?
No, I don't think it does. And I'm not sure I want it to go away, because I think that means you're being more authentic and sincere around the way you're messaging. I don't ever want to be flippant about it. It is part of my identity. It has had an impact on the person I am today. It doesn't define.
It's really interesting. When I listen to you, it almost feels that you're putting a mirror up towards me, because a lot of the things you say are the things that I do as well, and also how I feel. And I asked you that question because I was actually hoping you would say it does, because I feel exactly the same. And even doing this podcast, it's an act of courage, because talking about it and you have all these feelings, and I don't think it goes away, but I do think it can be reframed in a much more positive way.
100%.
And
100%.
by having conversations with you and by sharing stories, instead of people feeling alone, I feel it's relatable. They listen to these conversations and they don't feel alone. And that's the goal, isn't it? It's to share stories.
Absolutely. The other thing I would say as well, and I think this is really a really important message for people to hear, is that if I had an opportunity to be born again, would I choose to be born with Microtia, or would I choose to be born with two fully formed ears? It would be the former. I would choose to be born with Microtia, because I think
ultimately, goosebumps.
Well, I think ultimately that's had such a positive impact on me in terms of drive and wanting to succeed and really find a way to really meet my true potential.
It's a privilege.
Yes.
It's a privilege to have Microtia because, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, and I spoke about this in a previous episode, I feel, and I don't know if you agree with me, that Microtia gives you resilience. You dig deep. You want to prove people wrong. When you have Microtia, you see yourself like everyone else. And so it's almost quite annoying when people say things that, things like, well, you won't be able to do this because you have a disability, or no, you're going to fall behind at school. No, I'm not. In fact, I'm going to excel in absolutely everything and do better because of that.
Yeah.
And is that, do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. I mean, let's make some real life examples for me. I did my dive course on the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. So,
wow.
And at that point, I hadn't had the surgery, but I did it. I even went as far as passing the medical for my PPL, my private pilot's license.
Wow.
So I met the criteria to be able to kind of fly a light aircraft. Now, I wouldn't be able to fly a commercial jet. I mean, can you imagine? This is the air traffic control says, descend to 10,000 feet. I'm like, sorry, what was that?
Pardon? Where did that come from?
So everyone's got a limitation in some shape or form. But why can't you test the limits? You've got to push the envelope.
And it's also how you see yourself is not how others see you, which goes back to the point, your experience in the hairdressers. You've got all this anxiety, you're telling yourself the story in your head, but the actual reality is the lady who cuts your hair is having every conversation with you, like a normal conversation that she would have with anyone, and not even talking about your ear. So it's sometimes we can And that's completely normal. We all do it, but we build up this story
Yeah,
when
you can overthink
most
it,
of the time,
completely blow it out of
yeah,
real life proportion. You might think it's proportionate from yourself, but I think when you're in that kind of situation where you can either step up or step away, stepping up and going through that process can really be life affirming and refreshing, and you get a real kick
equally
out of it.
it's quite scary to step
Oh
up and to
gosh,
put yourself
yes,
out there.
yeah,
But once you do it, and it then feels refreshing, rewarding, and you feel like you're accomplishing something versus the opposite, which is moving away from that, shrinking.
yeah,
And you
yeah.
shouldn't have to.
No, absolutely. Look, that was an act of courage for me. So for some people, gosh, he went to the hairdresser, had his hair cut short above his ear. Big deal. But it was a big deal for me because it was the first time I was doing it. Is it a big deal for me now? No, because I've done it. I've gone through and come out the other side of that. But for someone else that was about to do the same thing, absolutely, I get it. And you want those words of encouragement. You want people to understand, negative voices as well that are doing battle with the positive voices in your head in terms of whether you do or you don't.
Exactly. And there's one of the other things that I wanted to just quickly touch on before we wrap up. In the world that we live today, there's such a huge emphasis on appearance and what we look like. And it would be amazing to kind of reframe that as well and focus more about actually, it's about how you feel. It's about your self-worth. It's about being a good person. And it's obviously nice to take care in your appearance, but how about being a good person? How about having a kind heart? How about healing from the inside before considering something external,
Yeah.
is what I'm trying to say, because people rush off to do these surgeries, but what they haven't really thought about is, well, if you try and actually reframe certain feelings in your mind and your perspective on things, then maybe you wouldn't even consider doing that in the first place.
Yeah, look, and I think that's a difficult one because everybody's different. It depends on your strength of character. It depends on the experiences you've had, and it can change from day to day. Some days you'll be able to deal with that easily, and other days you'll want to step away because you just don't feel that you've got the energy to deal with it. And something I've heard reference a lot with people with facial difference or some form of disability is it's exhausting continuing to have to talk about it. Now, I see there's a need to do it, but it has an impact on you. The other thing that I absolutely 100% believe is in any corporate environment, and probably the same applies to schools as well, when you're thinking about support mechanisms for individuals that need something different, don't just look at it from a theoretical perspective, involve them. And the phrase that I often use is nothing about me without me. So you need to be in the room. Anyone that's trying to come up with a process, a procedure, a rule book, and they're not including the people with the lived experience, it's going to fail. You need to bring the people to the table. You need their engagement. You need their views. You need their.
That's really good advice. Paul, for anyone listening, especially parents or young children with microtia, what is the message you would like to share with them?
Don't let it hold you back. Go for it. It's actually an opportunity. Grab it.
And a bit of a difficult question. If you had a child with microtia and you were in the predicament of, do I offer my child corrective surgery at the age of 6, or do I wait for them to get older to make their own decision? What would you do?
And I'd probably wait in terms of the corrective surgery, as in the plastic surgery. I would immediately go with the Baha. And get the bone anchored hearing aids sorted as soon as you can. I have trialed them, and I did that probably about 10, 11 years ago, living in Singapore. And it was very, this is going to sound very strange, it's very Olivia Newton-John, because it was a bar that was in a headband, so I had to wear this headband with it kind of positioned at the back of my head. And I'm like, I must look ridiculous. So I then put a baseball cap on. And my experience of the Baha was really, really challenging. And I think it's challenging when you're an adult. I think when it's a very, very young child, it just becomes part of their growth journey, which is a strange way of framing it. But apparently it takes the brain a month to 6 weeks to retrain itself for an adult. And for me, it was too distracting. So you're walking down the street, trying to have a conversation with somebody on my left side, where I've got full hearing. But because I now had the Baha on the right side, I couldn't hear what they were saying because of the noise of the traffic and the birds and everything else. My brain didn't have the ability to filter. Similarly, being on conference calls, and I'm trying to listen to the conference call, and I've got the Baha on, and my brain can't filter everything else that's going on around me, that I have to take it off. So I think the Baha is absolutely something that must be done at the earliest possible opportunity, because it then becomes part of the child's growth.
And you wouldn't suggest having the surgery, the corrective surgery, when you're young. You would wait.
I think it's personal, and I think that the experience I had is probably very different to the experience you'd have today. I had a lot of procedures. The medicine has evolved so much, and there'll be far more knowledge and efficiency around the surgeries. So I would definitely investigate, and I would use groups like Microtia UK and others to ask the question and inform yourself. I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way. It's what is right for you as a parent and your child. So I think the best thing you can do is educate yourself so that you make an informed decision.
Paul, if the listeners would like to reach out to you, what's the best way?
Well, I'm not very big on social media, so I'm only on LinkedIn, which is for professional networking. Clearly, you can find me through Microtia UK. You can also find me through the Face of Charities International website as well. So either through Tina at Microtia UK or FEI is probably the best way to find.
Okay, I'll link all of that in the show notes below. And Paul, I want to thank you for your time today, because you're really stepping up in terms of the roles that you're playing within the certain organisations. You're a voice for Microtia and beyond, and your story and other stories, all of it helps by just sharing stories and making it easier for people on their Microtia journey, not just with Microtia, but with any facial differences or any differences, that they're not alone. And actually, we're all in this together, and we're all unique and beautiful. And I think that's one of the messages that, I've certainly got from our conversation today, that we are all the same, and that there is support out there. And we aren't in the 1970s anymore. So, that you've got no reason really to feel alone, because there are these groups that can support you. And there's lots of people like yourself, Paul, and myself, and Tina at Microtia, and all the other lovely people out there that are willing to chat. So you're not alone. So I wanted to say thank you very much.
You're very welcome. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.